Extreme Battle, The Three Great Super Saiyans, the seventh movie under the Dragon Ball Z banner, premiered July 11th, 1992, just after Cell Absorbed number 18 in the manga, and right as the artificial humans arrive at Kame House in the television adaptation. As for the plot, three new artificial humans, new to us but apparently earlier in the production line, number 13, number 14, and number 15 awaken, and set off to get revenge on Goku. Goku, Vegeta, and Trunks unite as Super Saiyans to fight back. Once number 14 and number 15 are taken out, number 13 absorbs their components and transforms, but Goku merges his Super Saiyan strength with a Genki Dama and takes him out the end. I'm not even going to beat around the bush with this one. 1992 was just not a good year for Dragon Ball Z movies. As I explained a couple of months ago, I do not find movie 6 all that great, but I think this one is even worse. In fact, I think it's the worst movie of the original run. The funny thing is, I really can't find many distinct attributes that make it that much worse than most of the other Z movies of around its time. But that's a large part of the problem. Let's take a look at what we have here. Kuririn gets knocked aside asking why this always happens to him. He whines about never getting married. Chi-Chi obsesses over studying. Piccolo arrives at an opportune moment to save Gohan. Vegeta arrives at an opportune moment to save Goku, while saying, "I didn't come here to save you, Kakaroto, and you will be defeated by my hand." Minions are defeated, and the main villain transforms. All the good guys are defeated but Goku. Goku pulls out a Genki Dama when all seems hopeless. Aside from the window dressings, there is almost nothing new here. This has all been done. It's all been done multiple times. It's all been done with more aplomb. It's all been done while the above beats were still fresh and new. I've spoken several times during our look through the Z movies about what I consider to be the formula. I've said that movie 2 really codified what the formula was. By movie 4, it had become fairly entrenched. At this point, it's just tired. There is nothing resembling effort in this movie. The requisite check marks are once again regurgitated onto the screen for 45 minutes of banality. If you've ever wanted to see what a Dragon Ball movie on autopilot looks like, this is it. In my last movie review, I did object to it not having any characterization, but instead focusing entirely on fighting. This one returns to the tradition of including an opening leisure scene because this movie cannot do anything outside of formula. Okay, sorry, I do give it credit for that. At least there is some token attempt, but that's the best I can say of it. Unfortunately, it's lost any and all purpose. Allow me to illustrate. In movie 2, we're not hanging out in Gohan's room just because. It's setting up his character conflict so we as the audience understand what is motivating his actions for the rest of the film. In movie 3, Gohan and the gang aren't going camping to kill a few minutes before the fighting starts. Unbeknownst to them, the seeds of the evil plot, no pun intended, are being sown in this forest. There is a contrast being drawn between the villains who destroy nature for their own selfish ends, and the heroes who sacrifice to restore it. In addition, these opening scenes introduce Higher Dragon, whose developing bond with Gohan moves much of the plot along. Even in movie 4, Gohan isn't whistling to Piccolo just because we need a token silly moment. It's setting up a plot point that's going to become useful at the end of the film. Those are scenes that exist organically because their narratives require them. Here, Goku and friends are at the mall, which has nothing to do with anything. It's there because it's time for the designated leisure activity of the film, trademark. There is characterization in this movie, but it is the most threadbare, caricatured, by-the-numbers introductions to these characters possible. They are distilled to their most basic traits, absolutely nothing more, and it's really irritating, especially in regards to Chi-Chi, who is more materialistic, more shrewish, and more physically abusive than I have ever seen her. But it applies to all the characters to a certain extent. Oolong and the Muten Roshi are perverts, Trunks is earnest and serious, Gohan is idealistic, Kuririn is unlucky at everything he does, Vegeta is obsessed with Goku and nothing else. Again, it's better than what movie 6 did, but just barely. It almost makes me wish they hadn't bothered. I think the most telling sign of this is in the title, The Three Great Super Saiyans. That is what this movie focuses on aside from its villains. And it does indeed show three Super Saiyans. It makes a big deal about showing them all transform at the same time. That's the draw. But because of that, they're also the only characters who do anything worthwhile in this movie. You could cut out Gohan, Krillin, and Piccolo without really missing anything at all. But they can't not be here, because they have to fulfill their roles in the formula! In fact, the movie seems to go out of its way to sideline them. Gohan and Krillin spend most of the movie just watching what's going on. Anytime Krillin tries to get involved, the movie quite literally shoves him aside as if to say, just sit down. He even tells Gohan at one point that they have no role here. Yeah, I know. I can't believe the movie is self-aware enough to actually admit that. Essentially, Gohan attempts to fight just long enough to get him into trouble so that Piccolo has to enter the movie to save him. And then Piccolo pretty much does nothing after that. See what I mean? This movie is so hamstrung by the formula, it simply cannot contemplate breaking away from it, even if it means including characters for absolutely no other reason than to fulfill their tired gags. I said in my Movie 6 review that the characters had become interchangeable action figures. Here, they are their catchphrases. I also feel the need to point out that when I reviewed Movie 6, I got a lot of comments from people declaring that Broly was next. Now, maybe that's because everybody has Broly on the brain right now because there is a brand new movie featuring him as we speak. But when I corrected them, they flat out admitted they forgot about this movie. I have no trouble understanding why. It is completely forgettable. Okay, I needed to vent. Let's dig into some other aspects of this film. Let's talk about its dubious place in the timeline. I usually save that for towards the end, but in this case, I don't know if I can go any further without dealing with this first. So, round peg in a square hole, it doesn't fit, there's no place for this movie to go, the artificial humans we see in the series give way immediately to Cell, by the time Cell is defeated and Peace is returned, Goku is, let's just say, not around. The days of peace before the Cell games don't work either because Gohan is too young and not one of the 3 Super Saiyans in this movie. Just like the previous movie, characters are plucked out of the series mid-Cell arc and just dropped into this movie, and that's really as deeply as it needs to be considered. 7th verse, same as the first. We've been through all this before. But in this case, its lack of cohesion stands out all the more because this movie tries to tie itself into the current plot of the series more than any other before it. Oh, there have been oblique references to events in the series in previous Dragon Ball Z movies, whether or not those events conflict with the movie events. Garlic Jr. references Goku's and Piccolo's fight in the Tenkaichi Budokai. Gohan dreams of Piccolo sacrificing himself. The Tullus Space Crusher Corps mention Frieza in passing. Goku and Piccolo comment on their weighted clothes while forced to team up against a threat that has kidnapped Gohan. The closest is Movie 5, which is a direct follow-up to Frieza, but at least it was clearly positioned after Frieza was defeated. It was also released around the time that story arc was finishing, so there weren't a huge amount of loose ends to tie up, which probably has a lot to do with why it's relatively easier to try to cram it into series continuity if one wishes. But this movie completely and directly wraps itself up in the events of the Cell arc. Number 17 kills Dr. Gero. The computer in the basement continues without Dr. Gero. The main villain, who comes from said basement computer, completes himself in much the same way that Cell does. But the plot it's cribbing from is still far from being resolved, which means no one involved in making this movie knew how any of those ultimately played out. And since the movie relies on those elements as integral parts of its backstory, it calls attention, far more so than most other movies, to how confusing its own nature is. The opening makes clear this is at a point after number 17 and number 18 have been activated. So were they defeated? If so, why is Trunks hanging around? If not, where are they? Does Dr. Gero have another identical giant underground computer? Because it sure looks like the one that made Cell, the one that Krillin and Trunks destroy. So, is Cell here? Has he been killed? It's impossible for the movie to say because the movie doesn't know. The best it can do is have Goku say, "Oh, that Dr. Gero's at it again!" as if he's talking about Dr. Claw or something. See, as lacking in thought as the premises of these movies are, they at least tend to have the good sense to pluck the characters out of the story and plop them back in a scenario far enough removed that you're not thinking about its lack of cohesion most of the time. This movie pulls the bizarre double act of telling you not to think about it while simultaneously bludgeoning you over the head with constant reminders that this doesn't make sense. Oh, and it wouldn't be a DBZ movie of this era without Toei getting the jump on Toriyama's ideas. Movie 4, Super Saiyan before Super Saiyan happened. Movie 6, Dende before Dende happened. Movie 7, Perfect Cell analog just days before Perfect Cell happened. They really cut it close with this one. On a related note, I guess I should say, interestingly enough, that it appears Toriyama cross-promoted the premise of this film, as the title page of chapter 367, which came out a little over 3 months before this movie, shows a timeline of Dr. Gero's creations, and notes that number 13, number 14, and number 15 were close to being completed. That seems a little close to the release of the movie for me to think it was the other way around, that the movie took its premise from that brief mention. Plus, we know that Toriyama designed the villains for this movie, although Toei swapped the numbers for the two minions. However, I'm not sure if they requested an assimilating villain to be reminiscent of Cell, or if it was Toriyama's idea because he had Cell on the brain. I said earlier that everything about this movie is the same as other movies aside from the window dressing. Let's talk about that window dressing. The Son family doing their shopping isn't bad. Goku in a shopping mall is something that hasn't ever been done before. Seeing the characters outside of the usual elements of fighting and planning to fight is always something I enjoy. In this case, though, it does boil down to one extremely tired gag, which is, women, they be shopping! Followed by its ever-present corollary of, beleaguered man dragged along gets to hold the impossibly tall stack of packages. And as I said, the level of crazed violence in Chi-Chi this film is something that I find annoying, which is heavily tied into the women be shopping premise. That, and it's just such a brief surface-level event because, as I said, there's no effort in this film. And I can't say the we accidentally arrived a day early for the world's most beautiful girl world competition fares all that much better either, especially when Criterion creepily suggests they peek into the dressing rooms to watch the girls change. When he says it was a gag, and that he wants to be a martial artist known for gags, I start to worry which meaning of the word he's actually talking about. Trunks makes his movie debut here, and as he's one of those 3 great Super Saiyans, he is given a lot to do, mainly serving as Goku's sidekick until each character splits off into his own fight. He also has the dubious distinction of uttering the weirdest line in the movie when he taunts number 13 by saying he knows Goku will defeat him because Trunks is from 20 years in the future, and 20 years in the future, number 13 doesn't exist. That does not make the slightest bit of sense. Yeah, guess what, Trunks? Number 19 and number 20 didn't exist in your world either, and that didn't mean squat! You're a time traveler who understands the rules of time travel less than Marty McFly! While the Genki Dama is employed as the finishing move here, it does get a bit of a twist. Kuririn comments that Goku as a Super Saiyan can't use the Genki Dama since it doesn't work with a malicious heart. Wait, I thought you had to have a pure heart to be a Super Saiyan. But apparently it doesn't mean he can't just absorb the thing into himself and use it as a power-up. And, you know, it does seem pretty cool, especially with this nightmare-inducing image of Goku. Ultimately, the end of the series will contradict this no Super Saiyan Genki Dama rule, but it's interesting. Perhaps the most creative thing in the movie. Finally, the villains. They suck. Well, the majority of them do. Number 14 is a blank slate with absolutely no personality, and I honestly forget he exists most of the time. Number 13 has a really stupid design before transforming into an even stupider design that looks like a behemoth from Final Fantasy. Sorry, Toriyama, but it's true. I have no idea why the computer waits to release number 13 until the most appropriately dramatic moment to do so. And like with Cell, I have no idea why he wasn't simply created in his boss mode. And he also has no personality. However, number 15 is the one bright spot in this entire movie. I really like him, with his sunglasses and his zoot suit. Number 15 has personality, but applied in a very subtle way, which is something Dragon Ball doesn't usually do very well. He has all of these comedic tics. He drinks from a flask, number 14's braid gets in his face, forcing him to knock it away, and he repeatedly sinks into the snow. With any other character, I feel he'd be annoying and over the top, but he just comes off as stoically annoyed, practically never speaking and dealing with his inconveniences and moving on. That's what makes it funny. He also has a great death scene, finding himself in the unenviable position of catching his own severed head. Why couldn't he have been the main villain? It might have come close to saving this movie. In a few places, the music does as well. There aren't that many standout pieces, but those that do, really do. The march I use in the opening is one of my favorites and punctuates many tense moments during the later Cell arc. But perhaps the best piece, which you'll hear if you stick around for the credits, is the music used when number 13 is beating Goku to a bloody pulp. It's melodramatically gut-wrenching, but hey, that's Dragon Ball. It's only used a total of 6 times over the course of the series, but always makes an impression. The Genkidama music is okay, but is rendered extraordinarily cheesy because of its obvious synth choir. Would it really have killed you guys to hire some singers? I mean, jeez! So that's DBZ Movie 7. It's lazy, it's boring, it's redundant, it's stupid, it is one I highly recommend staying away from. I'm not going to say that every movie from here on out is a gem, but it does appear that Koyama at least realized how worn out the movies were getting, because no subsequent movie is as phoned in and formulaic as this one. So, that's something to look forward to. Something else to look forward to is the continuation of Dragon Ball Dissection December, as we move on to the Cell Arc Part 12 on Christmas Day. See you next week!